Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome to this important webinar on leveraging the inclusive innovation framework to increase formal remittances to Nepal. United Nations Capital Development Fund is an investment agency within the UN system with a focus on economic development in the world's 46 least developed countries. With its capital mandate and instruments, UNCDF offers last-mile finance models that unlock public and private resources, especially at the domestic level. As an agency contributing to the graduation of LDCs, we are also excited that last year, in November, Nepal was approved for graduation from LDC status after years of development and humanitarian efforts by UN agencies, World Bank, DFIs, multilateral organizations, and with due credit to the government and their respective bilateral partners. Indeed, the UN Economic and Social Council recommended Nepal to be graduated to a non-LDC status with a preparatory period of 5 years. We expect that decision to be effective in 2026. Over the past 25 years, UNCDF has led the thought leadership and implementation on financial inclusion within the UN, providing financial and technical assistance to more than 160 private sector partners. Many of the best-known banks in these markets, from Equity Bank in South Sudan to AMK Microfinance in Cambodia, have at one point in time been UNCDF partners. And over the past 10 years, our work has, of course, focused intensively on digitization. The successful interventions in diverse markets have also deepened our conviction that to strengthen financial inclusion and resilience of the vulnerable segments, we must engage in the sectors within the real economy with which those segments engage and transact every day. UNCDF's financing models work through two channels. One, inclusive innovation, inclusive finance, which expands the opportunities for individuals, households, and small businesses to participate in the local economy. And two, by showing how localized investments through fiscal decentralization, municipal finance, and structured project finance can drive public and private funding. Beyond grants by the first two practices, LDC investment platform offers loans, guarantees, specialized technical assistance, amongst others, as per the pipeline of opportunities provided by the LD and IDE practices. The migration and remittances efforts of UNCDF are hosted within the inclusive digital economies practice. The migrant segment, which is the focus of our webinar today, plays a very important role. We learn within this segment about how remittances and related financial services have the potential to create a positive impact for tens of millions of people, especially when we consider the cascading effects of financial services to not just migrants and their families, but through them within their communities. UNCDF's focus is on ensuring that constraints around access, usage, and resilience for migrants are acknowledged and addressed. Some questions that we address. How do we ensure that migrants have access to affordable and fast digital remittance services that take transparency and consumer protection principles into account? But access does not usage. So how do we make it worthwhile for migrants and their families to choose digital alternatives instead of cash? How do we develop the right incentives for migrants and for other market participants to sustain end-to-end digitization? Finally, how do we ensure that the last mile delivery channels developed by the remittance service providers over decades can not only be used to move small value transfers from point A to point B, but also to offer migrant-centric financial products and services that can eventually expand financial inclusion and resilience of migrants and their families. All this questioning leads us to the focus of our webinar today. The Inclusive Innovation Framework of UNCDF is an approach to solve the challenge ecosystems face when it comes to innovation. The lack of clarity about which migrant-centric innovations are viable for the markets. In other words, which digital innovations are accessible, affordable, and contribute to the financial resilience of migrants and their families. Let us be clear, inclusive innovation is not just about developing an app. It's not just about using technology to drive down costs so as to reach the bottom of the pyramid market, although those things are of course important. Inclusive innovation from UNCDF's perspective means taking an ecosystem approach. Economies are digitizing all over the world, but technology in and of itself is neutral. The digitization of the world's economies can serve to make those economies more inclusive, or it can be a force for making economic inequalities even wider than they are right now, by making business as usual ever faster and more efficient. That goal requires, as I said, to take a 360-degree ecosystem approach to our work. In the case of migrant remittances, it means working with policymakers and regulators to think through and implement enabling frameworks for migrant remittances on both the send and receive side. It means working with remittance service providers to reimagine remittances completely. And it means working with migrants themselves to truly understand and deliver what they value in financial services. In response to the challenge of getting clarity on migrant-centric innovations in Nepal, UNCDF is proud to announce the release of the Nepal Inclusive Innovation Assessment Report, which represents a solid contribution to the challenge described. It is the result of a methodology for positioning and prioritizing interventions at multiple levels of remittance ecosystems to improve the migrant centricity of innovations. At the product and institutional level, it identifies opportunities for remittance service providers to improve their product and service offerings. At an ecosystem level, it identifies ecosystem-level enablers and inhibitors that can accelerate or hinder migrant-centric innovation. And finally, it proposes recommendations to various stakeholders to create a favorable ecosystem for migrant-centric innovation. You may follow the link that is provided to you on the chat. The content and discussion of our webinar today are largely based on insights coming from the Nepal Inclusive Innovation Assessment Report and on the perception of key stakeholders of the Nepal remittance ecosystem. It is UNCDF's hope that the insights and shared today will trigger and nudge the stakeholders to contribute individually and collectively to a Nepal remittance ecosystem where inclusive innovation is brought to reality and allows increase of foreign remittances to Nepal. I will not conclude my opening remarks without presenting a special thanks to the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. The efforts of UNCDF on migration and remittance to address the challenges of current remittance markets that do not necessarily work for people on the move are generously supported by the SDC. Without their support, this inclusive innovation framework and related efforts towards inclusive innovation in Nepal would not have been possible. With that, I would like to open the floor to Antonia Fluck from SDC, who is the Nepal Program Manager, for her opening remarks. Thank you, Antonia.
Thank you, Serge, for handing over the floor to me. And I would like to start thanking UNCDF for organizing this very interesting webinar and welcoming all the panelists and participants. We are very grateful for the good cooperation with UNCDF in this important field. And I think, Serge, you already highlighted very important points, which I will also touch upon in my opening remarks. SDC, the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, has been working in Nepal for more than 60 years. And we started our engagement on labor migration a decade ago. So we have quite a wealth of experiences. In the first years of our engagement, we supported outgoing migrants. And then over the past 5 years, we supported the government of Nepal to strengthen the services for migrants in countries of destinations through their missions and consulates there. And this year, we started a new partnership on reintegration, which shall allow returnee migrants to make best use of their social and economic capital and skills, which they are bringing back to Nepal. Now some numbers. Remittances inflow increased by 4.8% in the last fiscal year and hit a record high of 1,000 billion Nepali rupees. This equals to $8.3 billion US. And you're probably all well to around 25% of the GDP. So they are an important driver of economy. And we think they're also an important reason why Nepal will graduate from its we heard this from Serge. During the pandemic, more money was channeled through formal channels. So it would actually be possible. But once travel restrictions were lifted, the amount went down again. People were switching back to informal channels. So why do we think that UNCDF's engagement together with partners on social protection and financial inclusion is so important? From our projects, we know that very simple financial literacy classes can often be a first stepping stone for enhanced economic well-being of migrants and their families. Migrants who attended financial literacy classes are keen to access formal financial services or even go for further trainings, for example, on entrepreneurship. At the same time, I would like to highlight the reality in Nepal, especially in rural Nepal. Not only financial literacy is required, but also digital literacy. This is not always a given for the current generations of migrant workers and their families. But of course, this is changing quickly. And even though 85% of migrants leaving the country through formal channels are men, any service or intervention should be designed to address the special needs of women and other discriminated groups. Women left behind are often those who manage the remittances sent back home, and they invest also or decide how they are invested. And then also many women migrate through informal channels. So it's actually not only men who migrate. My final point, with the promulgation of the Constitution and changes in relevant policies, migration services have been federalized. We can clearly see in our projects that access to services has improved as a consequence. Hence, it is vital to offer services and required trainings at provincial and local level through close collaboration with the government at local and provincial level. With this, I conclude. Enjoy the webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Antonia, for your opening remarks. Without further ado, let's dive into Nepal country insights with Amit, UNCDF's Senior Financial Sector Specialist for Nepal. Amit, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Serge, and thank you, Antonia, for those wonderful welcome remarks. Morning, everyone. Really excited to be with all of you here today and looking forward to a great learning experience. Before we dive into the specifics of this particular assessment, we really wanted to start with showing you an overall picture of the approach that we have taken towards doing this assessment. When we talk about innovation and we talk about the use of informal channels, we take a look at the source of this problem. And the reason why most of the people switch to informal means is in fact really it's a better option than the formal services that are available out there. It's easy to use. It requires less documentation. It builds on some of the social equity that people have, social networks, families and friends, and oftentimes it's cheaper than what the formal system offers. But then, of course, in the long run, it is something that is not very beneficial either to the country or to the people and the families. When people use informal channels, they end up losing on opportunities that the formal financial services system offers to save, invest, and grow their wealth. So when we look at inclusive innovation, essentially we believe that innovation needs to be driven at 3 different levels. Oftentimes, when you think of innovation, we think of innovation at a product level. But given the complications that are there and the nature of the problem itself, we believe that innovation needs to be driven at 3 different levels. This is the basis of our assessment. And as we go through the slides, we'll be diving into each of these layers to come up with recommendations and suggestions. We look at innovation essentially as a continuum. We don't think that you can categorize an organization or a country as innovative or not innovative. Essentially, it is a scale. On the left-hand side, we see one extreme where we say that the needs of the marginalized and underrepresented segments are neither delivered to research nor accounted for. So people are really forced to use whatever options are out there. And the other extreme, their needs are well identified, recognized, and the entire ecosystem, including the private sector, the regulators, and other stakeholders, are actively pursuing opportunities to innovate and offer them services that really work for them. And in our experience, the different layers that we explore offer opportunities to innovate. Next slide, please. We based this assessment on 2 sources of information. We started off with a secondary research approach, essentially looked at the literature, the work that's been done by various stakeholders over the years to explore this specific topic. But a primary source of information, intelligence, and insights was stakeholder consultations. These are the stakeholders that we've been engaging with as part of this assessment, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of them. We're also happy to say that a number of them are joining this webinar today and are being are witness to the presentations. We started with looking at the various stakeholders and getting their feedback. We'll also say that, of course, this is while this is a very comprehensive list, there are other stakeholders whom we would continue to engage as we start this journey in Nepal. Next slide, please. So why do we study Nepal, and why is it important when it comes to remittances? As Antonia and Serge mentioned, close to about 25% of Nepal's GDP is accounted for by remittances, amounting to close about $8.1 billion. A whooping 56% of households receive remittances. It primarily means that's their primary source of income. One of the family members is migrated, is working overseas, and that's the sole source of income for the family. And when it comes to measuring personal remittances as a percent of GDP, Nepal ranks 7th highest globally. And all of these factors make remittances really an important component of the way financial services are developed in the country. It gives the opportunity to essentially leverage remittances as that one service on top of which several other services could be built. It also brings focus on issues and challenges that customers face when it comes to receiving remittances from overseas. And we look at some of those challenges in the next set of slides. One of the the key challenges that we identified as part of this assessment is that while the importance of remittance is understood by all the stakeholders, the provision and the uptake of digital remittances has been low, especially for the unserved segments. There are still cases of people using informal remittances for a variety of reasons. We also find that product innovation, keeping in mind the needs of the women, is not very common in the market. And while there have been some really valuable attempts to build financial literacy, the campaigns are often fragmented and not being scaled up. And when we look at a combination of all these challenges, it leads to a state where, while there is a very big need for improving the remittances services infrastructure, transparency, ease of use in the country, there's still barriers to be addressed. And none of these barriers can be addressed by one specific stakeholder. What it requires really is actions at different levels, starting from the ecosystem at the institutional level and then going down to the product level. Next slide, please. We basically start by highlighting some of the challenges that we have identified, starting from the product level. And one of the key insights that we had was that 90% of the population in Nepal prefers to communicate in languages other than English. They prefer the vernacular language, and this is not true only for digital. Even we look at the distribution of newspaper dailies in Nepal. The largest English daily actually, has 1/3 the publications in terms of circulation compared to the daily that's printed in Nepalese. So people do have preference for, their own languages other than English. This is also true for social media, as we know that all the big tech platforms support local languages. This wasn't the case 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but with the explosion of social media, the expansion of telecom networks, access to internet connectivity, everybody recognizes the need to offer solutions in languages that people are comfortable communicating with. And we realize that most of the digital applications in Nepal do not support vernacular languages. So this is where we feel is really the first barrier, the first low-hanging fruit that can be addressed by service providers, is to offer products in the languages that people are comfortable communicating in. Next slide, please. This is I think is a very, very important point. I think across all markets we see the importance of agents, and particularly in the case of Nepal, where people prefer to receive money via agents in cash. And over the years, the network of these agents have kind of grown. It has really expanded, and it truly, has established itself as one of the key assets any companies can have when they're offering inward remittance services. Agents also, offer the potential to act as partners when it comes to expanding the use of digital services. Given the fact that they've been part of the community for so many years, some of them been in the business for multiple generations. They are actually that one stepping stone when it comes to taking people from cash to digital. However, there is, I think, a limited understanding of how their strengths can be utilized. As we offer, services that can be used directly by the customer, the role that the agents have played in the past often gets challenged, and they can actually, act against the interests, of the company that is trying to take people to a digital mode. So there is, some effort that's required to clearly understand the role that agents play and the potential that is there when it comes to partnering with them. So we believe that this is one area that needs to be really, looked at very closely. Some of the recent work that we have done is focused on really looking at this network, how to make it more efficient, how to increase the incentives, and how to offer alternative source of income. Next slide, please. This, at an institutional level, we believe is one area That has been talked about a lot. However, when it comes to remittances, there are challenges to collecting gender disaggregated data. Without this data, it's very difficult to either assess the size of the market, to come up with products, or to even refine the marketing strategies that a company may have. And the challenges really start from the send side. Regulators all over the world, when it comes to KYC, do not specify that the gender of the either the sender or the receiver be collected, and they do this, I think, for logical reasons. The purpose of KYC essentially is to make sure that the person is genuine, the ID that they provide is genuine, and oftentimes it is the ID number that forms the basis of the KYC. Capturing the gender of the sender or the receiver is often not specified as a requirement by the regulator. So it then becomes a responsibility for the remittance company to collect that data, and that also kind of ties up to their keenness to develop products for the women customers. This is something where we believe there's a lot of scope for innovation, really starting with what data is already there, trying to see how best we can analyze them, and how that leads to insights, and then further improve the strategy of a company that's trying to innovate. But there's also a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of awareness amongst all stakeholders, starting from companies that are working with migrant workers, the employers themselves, and making sure that the data is captured at all levels of the migrant's journey and can better be utilized for product innovation. Next slide. It's again, I mean, I think in the context of Nepal, we've seen that organizations, especially the private sector, can find it really difficult to drive innovation and take risks. And if we see at the markets, in general in the region, a lot of innovation, especially around digital payments, is driven by global capital. So it is the big tech companies, taking their global fight for dominance into regional markets, and that leads to influx of a lot of capital, which then allows the locally funded companies enough capital so that they can innovate and really kind of develop products for the long run. In the case of Nepal, what we realize is that this can be a challenging aspect to address, and companies really need to be very, very choosy about where they can invest, how much they can invest, and whether they can take the long-term view or not. At an institutional level, this is something that I think has to be addressed somewhere in the midterm or long term, but really starting with building a use case for a particular product, demonstrating the effect using data, and at some point in time, I'm sure that these things will get addressed. But I think we in our assessment, we found that this was one of the major challenges that we face in Nepal. Next slide. This again, I think it links to the previous point. Again, the lack of global VCs, pushing for innovating on digital payments in Nepal has been a barrier. The industry has been innovating simply by leveraging the domestic capital that's available, and oftentimes, there are challenges in the amount of risk that companies can take to innovate. So there definitely is a scope for other stakeholders to kind of contribute to this particular process. Setting up of a fund that specifically targets innovations, with a view to serve women customers, for example, could be one of the areas that can be looked at. Again, I think when we look at the customers, there needs to be incentives to using the informal channels. There should be financial incentives that should be offered. But also what we've seen in other markets like Bangladesh, that quick cash incentives can often lead to significant behavior change and help achieving scale when it comes to this transition from the informal channels to the formal channels. And while offering interest rate based incentives like what we have in Nepal is clearly a good strategy. Transaction based incentives that can offers immediate support, financial support to the senders or the receivers can often change the behavior. And then finally, to quickly summarize the various areas that we have identified. At the ecosystem level, there's a need definitely to accelerate the digital payments ecosystem, build interoperability, but really the one thing that we see as a key focus area is to develop and deploy a women-focused entrepreneurship fund that can invest in fintech products. The reasons, as we shared earlier, doesn't happen in Nepal primarily because there's lack of gender disaggregated data, but there's also lack of funding and the risk-taking ability of companies. At the institutional level, we look at two areas essentially on building capacity on data collections and analysis support. We've been working in this area for a while now with some of our select partners. There's also a need for ensuring that companies get access to risk capital and they're able to innovate. On the product side, we already covered issues around making the products more responsive to the local needs, and then looking at expanding the agent network, specifically hiring women agents, and then develop value-added products on top of the remittance products. These, just to conclude the presentation, are just some of the initial areas that we have identified. I'm sure as we engage with our partners and strengthen our relationships in country, they will continue to evolve, and it will also help us, sharpen our, focus further. With that, I'd like to conclude, our presentation on the inclusive innovation assessment. And open the floor for questions for myself and my colleague Serge. Thank you.
Thank you for the enlightening insights, Amit. So we're open to questions. Please feel free to type in the chat window. We already have some interesting questions. So there's a question from Hula and the IME team regarding the existing ongoing work in Nepal around remittance-linked products, savings, credits, bill payments, and insurance. So if you'd like to address that, please go ahead, Amit.
Thank you very much, Faisal, and thank you, Hule, for the question. I think this question is from a colleague from IME Digital. The question is, what is the percentage of migrant workers with respect to men and women who are sending remittances based on your research? I can take that question. So our research work covers not only Nepal. We've been working with a very wide set of stakeholders, in Africa, in other markets in Asia. Now, globally, the percentage of women that send money or migrate abroad are almost as in same proportion as men, so 50% each. In percentage of Nepal, I think there are different sources that quote different data. Looking at the census information, the latest census 2021 from Nepal, the number is put at somewhere around 25%, which means that about out of 100 people that are kind of working abroad, 25% of them are women. In the case of women, we would also say, as Antonio also pointed out rightly, the level of informality can potentially be higher in case of women when it comes to men, and that's primarily because of the nature of the industries, that jobs that are meant for women, that are that they're recruited for, even like through the formal channels, they are They typically are in the services sector, which can often be either organized or semi-organized or unorganized, which makes it really difficult for us to track data. But to answer your question, I think in the case of Nepal, on the receiving side, the majority of the receivers are women, and that's a trend that we see almost same globally for other markets as well. I would not want to quote data from a specific service provider, but globally we do see that remittance receivers more than often happen to be women, which is where there's a need for us to innovate, around offering services and developing remittance link services, keeping the women customers in our mind. Thank you.
Amit, there's another very interesting question regarding how our inclusive innovation work that is supported by UNCDF is contributing to VC and VP investments for existing and new players. So if you could address that through venture capitalists and stuff.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Faisal. I think that's a great question. Serge, would you like to share your thoughts on this? And I'm happy to chip in as well.
Thank you very much, Amit, and thank you for the question. So UNCDF is engaged as we explained. To engage with the VC, so the work on the inclusive innovation is seed, I would say, that we can use to engage better and to leverage the interests of VC investors and international investors, and also local investors in the country. As we speak now, there's not a roadmap, specific roadmap about engaging with the VC in Nepal, but it's in part of the future, I would say, to engage and to have the possibility to engage with those stakeholders and help the stakeholders as a whole in the country to have better access to international and to national funding. So, yeah.
Thank you, Serge. Yeah, I think we've covered most of the points. I don't have anything else to add. Further, should we move on to the next question?
Please. There's one from Omkar Pandey, like about incentive-based programs that are aimed at transferring informal remittances to official channels. So, and he also talks about the FX rates and payment capital cap to Nepalese rupees 50K. So, what additional options do you view as viable for Nepal? That's an interesting question regarding the policy and stuff. Yeah.
Yes, I think when we, from UNCDF side, when we look at remittances, we believe that the maximum scope that lies in innovation and moving, informal remittances to formal channels lie in low value remittances. And the reason why we say this is because majority of the migrants, who are vulnerable to using informal channels are often those who earn, the lowest salaries for jobs that they're doing overseas. And when we look at them, we see this as a challenge. How do I, convince somebody who's sending, let's say, $100, $150 a month to shift to formal channels, to agree to pay to that, extra fee, to go through a KYC process, and to kind of really encourage the family to also, use informal, financial systems at their side. And that is something that, actually really is something that needs the long-term view. And as he said earlier as well, that financial, incentives do work, but it's a problem that needs a multi-pronged approach. It's a problem that requires, one to understand, the real problems, these specific segments, for example, that are there that are vulnerable to using informal channels. And the approach that we suggest is to, tackle this issue by innovating at multiple layers, starting from the ecosystem level, going on to institutions, and then finally to the product level. So if you talk about, the specific, incentives that we feel that can be offered, yes, the first thing that can be offered, for remittance customers would be incentives that are specifically targeted at low value remittances. We have seen very limited markets. I think Malaysia is one of the markets, or maybe Taiwan recently has come up with specific policies for low value remittances. Nowhere in the world have we seen a set of incentives that say that for remittances under $200, here are the set of incentives that we offer. Typically, incentives are kind of generalized irrespective of the value of the transfers that you're making. But it is our view that incentives need to be really tailored, as per the value of money that people are traveling, because the ones who remit the lowest amounts are often the most vulnerable, both on the send side as well as the receive side.
Yeah, thank you, Amit. There's an interesting question which draws analogies to India from Sugam. Are there any key learnings from India that Nepal can replicate for increasing formal remittances?
Yeah, so I think I'll also request Serge to share experiences from other regions, because I think it's for Nepal there's an opportunity to learn not only from regions, so countries like India and Bangladesh, but to really kind of be global in its approach. And pick up lessons from wherever good innovation is happening. But since your question is specifically for India, I'll take that. The Indian market, especially on the remittances side, India is one of the largest remittance receiving countries in the world. But I think a few things that work in India's favor is the domestic remittance ecosystem. And as I shared earlier, India has had the advantage of leveraging global capital with a lot of big players pumping money into the market through various channels, VCs, equity, and that has really helped India, invest in the development of the ecosystem. What has also helped is the promotion of digital payments, by the government and the government coming in as a key stakeholder. We'll hear from Nepal Clearing House later today as part of the panel discussion, but also having a public digital payments infrastructure has been, I think, one of the strongest assets of India. Now, with a very, very robust domestic payment system and a very large volume of inward remittances coming in, it has been easy for the country to link these two different worlds in some ways. One example that I want to share with you is the recent innovation where remittances are now being allowed to pay for domestic utility bills directly. And this has been made possible primarily because of the presence of the bill payment system, the Bharat bill payment system, which is essentially an entity that aggregates all the bill payments in India. And since this system is already there, the regulator has allowed for connecting this system with the remittances. Now, it may seem like a very simple thing that somebody is using remittances to pay bills, but what it really does is that it ensures that the control of the finances stay with the migrant worker. So instead of just sending money to an account and losing control of the finances, the ability to meet their responsibilities and to control the way the money is spent from where they are is actually a very, very empowering option to have. We have seen in our work, in our research, that oftentimes when migrants send all their money all at once, to the home country, they lose control of the finances. And there are cases when they return, the cases of families getting separated, and there's a lot of social, disturbance because of that. So making sure that the control of those finances remain in the hands of the worker is a key aspect, and the ability to pay for bills directly from remittance, I think, is a key component. And that's one of the innovations I think that can be clearly looked at, and I'm sure there's a lot of value for Nepal to look at those remittances. Serge, may I also request you to maybe share some experience from the African region and the work that we've been doing with various stakeholders there.
Thank you, Amit. The Nepal ecosystem can definitely learn from the market on top of India. This work that we are presenting today on innovation and especially the country assessment is an endeavor that we have started also in other countries of focus, which are Senegal, which are Bangladesh, which are Ethiopia. As mentioned, the inclusive innovation is not just about actually developing innovative product, but also ensuring that at an ecosystem level, there are the right regulatory policy making frameworks that allow for these innovations to flourish in the country. So based on that, each country having its own specificities, each country having its own specificities, we can as well say that in Nepal could at one point in time learn from the reports and from the assessments that we do in those other countries. We will make sure that in Nepal, the stakeholders are informed about other thorough assessments that we will do in other countries in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Serge. In the interest of time, we've overshot. Let's segue into the next session, which is the most interesting section where we'll have a distinguished panel of speakers. Amit, over to you. Why don't you introduce us to the amazing panelists?
Thank you very much, Faisal. Thank you very much, Serge. Thanks to everyone for all the wonderful questions. I think there are a couple of them that went unanswered. We'll take a note of them and we'll get back to you in writing with our responses. But thank you very much for that interesting set of questions. Moving on to the panel discussion, I'd like to welcome our esteemed panelists. And maybe if you could go to the next slide. Thank you very much. We'd like to welcome our panelists today. Shri Ramu Pordel, the Executive Director, Foreign Exchange Management Department, Nepal Rashtra Bank. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. We'd like to welcome Mr. Nilesh Mansingh Pradhan, Chief Executive Officer, Nepal Clearinghouse Limited. Thank you very much, Nilesh, for joining us in this discussion and also being part of the initial consultations. We'd like to welcome Mr. Bikash Nahata, Vice President, Product and Innovation from the IME Group. Thanks once again for the partnership, and we really look forward to hearing your thoughts today. We also have Ms. Indra, Director in the Foreign Exchange Management Department from NRB. Thank you very much, ma'am, for joining the discussions. With that, we'd like to start our panel discussions and request all our panelists, starting with Mr. Ramu, to please share their initial thoughts on the challenge of formalization of remittances and how inclusive innovation can assist us in that objective. Over to you, Ramu, sir.
Thank you, Amit. Good morning, everybody. And Mr. Serge, Anthony, and all the UNCDF team, including Amit, and all the panelists and participants. Very good morning, and thanks very much for bringing the innovative and very much useful research on remittances innovations. Coming to the point of today's discussions, could you please allow me, if possible, to share. I have 2 slides I want to present here before to start the views to come in the background. Okay. Is it seen?
Yes, sir. We can see the screen.
Okay. So while talking about the remittances, and over the past few years, since 2002, since 2 decades ago, we have started the formal remittances to encourage, and remittance is, since then, remittance is playing a very important role in the Nepalese economy. So if we look before, since then, though there is greater improvement in terms of GDP, the growth, and the flow of the remittances is already mentioned by Amit and Anthony, the total figures and the comparison in terms of GDP and among the top remittance receiving country, Nepal lies in the number 7. Sometimes it was on 5th, and on the GDP side, it was up to 29%, 30%, and currently 20 to 25%. So this is the general background. And if we look at the monthly flow of the remittances, this is the time at the time of the COVID, and the monthly flow was only 35 billion Nepalese rupees. And then after the at the time when the global shutdown was the remittance was declined sharply at the initial period, and when the lockdown was extended, then the remittance picked up, because you see, because of these all the formal channels were kicked up, and the highest inflow in some, let's say, in the history of the Nepalese remittance inflow taken in this time, 101 billion monthly flow was from the formal channels. And then after, when again because after that the migrant workers declined to go in the different countries, and also the different countries were affected, and then also the informal remittances channel were also emerged due to the pandemic come down. So then again the situation reversed back, and the formal channel were again not excited and not much encouraging and exciting to inflow in from the formal channels. So we see these situations, the average flow 70, 80, and 90 billions. And this was the situations. And recently, after the measure taken with the innovations of some of the payment systems and innovations channels, and some further improvement and few measures, enforcement measures. Now, recently, the remittance is a little bit in a satisfactory situations. So we think it is not. So there is still the potentiality and possibility of high inflow. We can just assume from these COVID situations inflow. So we need to, and so with this background, so the research, the inclusive and the innovations to bring the remittances in Nepal through the formal channels, I think the UNCDF research might provide very good policy inputs, and also to the regulators, to the stakeholders, and to the private sector as well, who are engaged in remittance business. Likewise, if we see, so as Amit already mentions, and the earlier speaker mentions, you see our export is very nominal, and despite of the various effort, the one of the most important source of foreign exchange, which is supposed to be export, it has not been improved in the past since many years. So it is always seen on the sleeping line. It has not gone above this line despite of the various effort. And the import, you see, the remittances and the import is surging very rapidly over the previous years. And the remittances also, despite the various efforts and innovations, not improved at all, the formal remittances. So it is on the type of straight line. The remittances inflow is on the straight line, and the import is mostly on the jumping line. So this is the situations. The export is on sleeping line, and the remittance is on straight line, and the import is on the jumping line. So the one of the most important source of the foreign exchange is in Nepal is the remittances. But despite of the various efforts, it has not improved as expected, and there are certain issues, of course, as Amit mentioned already, and the incentives. One of the most important measure to bring the remittances through the formal channels. We have started to provide some incentive through the interest rate, but that's not much encouraging it. And the incentive system that has been practiced by the government of Bangladesh and also in Pakistan, we are also discussing on it. But in the maybe it may work in the short term, but in the medium term and the long term, we need to explore different measures, because it may work for some time, but for the long-term sustainability of the formal remittances inflows, that may not work. So there are certain issues in Nepal's case, and also in the sender country, the remittance sending countries. Also, there are some issues. Either this research had looked at, checked these issues or not. I'm not much aware on it. Maybe I looked at this report, and so these issues will be solved both in advanced countries and also emerging market countries and other countries, such as in Gulf and other countries. For example, just I saw in the question and answer session before, the IME chair in India has shared that there are a lot of issues there. So that's the reason the Indo-Nepal remittances system is not effective. There are certain issues related with the KYCs and the onboarding the customer to the to remit the fund to Nepal, and these things. So the inclusion, the innovation also required in those areas, not only in receiving part or beneficiary part. So that's one issue, I think. And for the short term, innovation may work for some time, but it may not work for all time or longer period. And likewise, with the more trading with our Nepalese more trading partners countries, there are certain issues related with the cost and the incentive, the rate, exchange rate, these issues, this provided. So everywhere there is informal system, but we need to try to minimize these informal mechanisms. So this may be in terms of trade, import or export, under invoicing or over invoicings, and also the banking use of the banking systems and the formal remittances channel, such as the remittance companies, maybe most important in case of Nepal. So let me stop here, and there are other panelists also. Let's hear from them also, and we'll, if required, I will continue again. Thank you so much, Amit.
Thank you, Ramuji, for sharing those insights with us today. I think it's quite interesting, the graph that you showed, and you said that, you know, while it may take time to grow the exports, I think the low-hanging fruit right now, I think, is making sure that the channels, informal channels, are used by more and more people, and therefore you're able to, you know, take up the formal remittance country. Thank you very much once again. We will now move on to our next panelist. I'd like to welcome Mr. Nilesh Mansingh Pradhan, Chief Executive Officer of the Nepal Clearing House Limited, to share his opening thoughts on this very important topic of formalization of remittances and the value that you know, public digital payments infrastructure plays in that. Over to you, Nilesh.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you, UNCDF, for inviting me on this forum. A very wonderful discussion going on. Literally very enjoying the content and the participants' view as well, and the report that has been well explained by Amit and other representatives of UNCDF. Thank you very much. With respect to the initial opening remarks that the time has been given, from the institution perspective, the NCHL, this is basically an infrastructure provider company which provides an infrastructure as a payments infrastructure as a services to its members. When we say the members, it's basically the banks and financial institutions, other regulated entities like the remittance companies, insurance, microfinances, and even the capital market related stakeholders as well. We work very closely with them. But when it comes to the type of the payments infrastructure, we closely work with the payments strategy or the payments policy that is actually envisioned, or the policy direction given by the central bank. So we work very closely with them, and we remain as an implementation agency of the Rashtra Bank, so that the policy direction in terms of the national payments infrastructure is actually well thought of. They're procured, implemented, and they're operated well in a sustainable way. So when it comes to the remittance sector, I would like to refer to the National Payment System Development Strategy of the Central Bank on itself, which was published in December, I guess, 2014. So one of the pillars is to support the international remittance as well. So taking up on that pillar, we are working very closely with the remittance business that is actually driven by the banks and by many of the insurance companies as well. So within our infrastructure, we particularly work on the transactions for the formal remittance transactions. Those are directly credited onto the bank accounts or through the PSPs or the wallets, or for even we also support for the cash-based remittance, but in funding the agents, in terms of funding the agents' liquidity by the remittance companies or the banks is what we support. So it's basically the international remittances coming in formally into Nepal, and then our infrastructure, it works as a domestic rail for these remittance businesses. So in terms of the number of the transactions in last fiscal year that ended in mid-July 2022, our total transaction, including remittance and all other transactions, we processed around 70 million equivalent of 70 million number of transactions, equivalent to around 15.6 trillion Nepali rupee equivalent transactions. And in remittance sector, including the digital remittance, funding of the agents included on a real time and in a non-real time basis, we processed around 5.7 million equivalent of transactions. That's around 10.5% of our total digital transactions is what the remittance transaction is. And in terms of the value of transaction, that's around 560 billion Nepali rupee equivalent to transaction. That comes to around 10% of our digital transactions. When we call it a digital transaction, it's a real-time transaction, and it also includes the batch-based transactions as well. And as a part of our infrastructure, we not only provide the basic infrastructure for connecting the remittance with the banks or the other stakeholder entities, but there are infrastructure components which we call it as a biller gateway, which is basically interconnection of the services or the service payments, which we have seen few of the questions related to the bill payments as well. So those services are also integrated or interoperable and are available for the various stakeholders to extend to their customers. So it could be a remittance as well. So some of the local remittance companies have also used, apart from the normal movement of the funds or the movement of the money, those service payments have also been extended by some of the remittance companies, but have been used locally. So they are very well in a position to extend those services to the sending side as well. And we're also working with some of the remittance companies. In fact, one or two have actually gone recently live as well for connecting for fully enabling the full digital remittance on both on the sending side as well as the receiving side as well, whereby we have literally actually connected the ACH system of the country with our fast payment system or our ACH system. So the customers or the remitter on the sending side can actually use its any of the digital channel, paid by card or ACH, and send that money, lands on one of the remittance company, licensed remittance company here in Nepal, and it gets in an instant basis credited into the bank account. That's a recent innovative digital remittance intervention that we have actually worked out with two of in fact the remittance companies here. So this is what we are doing it right now, and we are very much look forward to work more with many of the remittance companies. In fact, 13 of the remittance companies are actually, we're working with them. So we look forward to further intervene and to help increase the number of transactions coming in as a remittance and as a digital remittance is what we are looking forward for. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nileshji, for sharing your thoughts and all the various innovations that NHCL is bringing into the market. We really look forward to learning more from you as we move on this journey ahead, and for your partnership. I would now request our third panelist, Mr. Vikash Nahata, Vice President, Product Innovation, IMA Group, to share his thoughts, initial thoughts on this topic before we move on to the moderated Q&A round. Over to you, Vikash. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit. Such an interesting session today. I think enough has been already told on the topic, starting from Antonio, yourself on your inclusive innovation framework, Ramu sir, Nilesh Dai. I'll keep it very short from an implementer perspective. One thing that I completely agree to Ramu sir is in any intervention that we try to make more formal remittance coming in terms of incentives or any program that we releases for the remittance companies, there might be a challenge that it might work for a short run, but again, the market factors will react to those and a certain different loops can start and that functionality might not work. My request to Ramu sir is there a possibility that we can work on a regulatory sandbox kind of approach, whereby certain partners are selected on your given parameters and we can work on those and experiment the model. And if it is successful, we can implement it nationally. Now, the more I have been studying about remittances and then my journey from cash pickup remittances, which is currently at 85%, and how do we convert them digitally? And by digitally, I mean both into bank account deposit and into mobile wallet account deposit. How do we start doing it? The more I learn about it, the final understanding that today I am reaching is it is all about financial and digital literacy. It has to start from the ground. Before a migrant moves to a foreign destination, he starts sending money and the family back home receiving money. If they are well aware about the financial literacy part, about their financial wellness part, half of the job is well done. Now, second request, and as a researcher working for product innovation for quite a long time, what I would be really interested is someday to cover undisclosed research questionnaires with some of the players who are actually helping remit or who are actually helping move the money through the hundi or the hawala channels? And why are the migrant community connected to these people? Why are they actually preferring a hundi or a hawala channel over a formal remittance channel, which is easily today available into their destination country? Some research, maybe I don't know whether from a private sector or with the help of regulator, I think some insight, there must be some benefit or incentive for these migrants to reach out to them and then start using it. If we could find those motivators and work upon them and incentivize or design the incentive program for our migrant workers accordingly, I think that should be super, super helpful. And the third key point that I would like to add, it is now not only about the hawala. Challenges at home are also increasing because due to lack of financial literacy and certain challenges with moving money digitally. Because if you look, fraud at local level have increased now. People are claiming money on accounts of others. So here again, if you look, cybersecurity and those things are already there. But in addition, again, financial literacy of the recipient is very important. I would especially urge Ramu sir to help us work on a sandbox approach, whereby you can design a certain program and we can participate. It can be a mix of participant and we can work together in finding out ways out, and then launch a more aggressive nationwide financial literacy program, whereby we can educate people on using of the digital channels, number one. Number two, also run program on their financial wellness and taking care of the finances. I think these are three key points that I was understanding. And one last piece that I would like to add, by remittances, we are still focused on other part of the world, but our trade relationship with India and the volume of remittances that we can build between India and Nepal is still unidentified. And India is one of our major trading partners, and we need to take care of that flow as well. Only 10% or nearby that number of people are actually using formal channels today. The rest is still moving openly across the borders. So that is also a place where we can help or we can look into to formalize the flow. I think I'll leave it there, Amitai, and thank you so much for such a wonderful arrangement today. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vikas, for sharing your thoughts, coming up with suggestions for collaborations amongst various stakeholders. In fact, this is exactly the kind of objective that we have in mind, to offer a common platform to all the key stakeholders, and so that this this cross-institution sharing of ideas can happen, and then hopefully UNCDF can play a supporting and an important role as a neutral partner in this journey. So thank you very much. I'll maybe request Ramu sir to respond to Vikasji's suggestion at some later date, maybe not now, but thank you very much again, Ramu sir, as well, for really sharing those insights and creating those ideas in our mind.
UNCDF is very grateful for the opportunity to have this event. The level of interest and interactions during the webinar are a true reflection of the opportunity at hand to further transform the Nepal remittance ecosystem. It is our sincere hope that this webinar has raised even more your interest for inclusive innovation and its potential to increase formal remittances in Nepal. The vision of inclusive digital economies supporting migrants and beneficiaries towards economic inclusion, financial health, and reduced inequality can only be a reality in Nepal if the stakeholders understand the opportunities. The Inclusive Innovation Country Assessment Report is envisioned as a resource to nudge the actions of the stakeholders towards the goals that are inclusive of the needs of the most vulnerable, but also of the business and regulatory realities. It is the ambition of UNCDF that stakeholders will freely use the content of the Nepal assessment, inclusive innovation assessment, to tailor their approaches and to innovation and to accelerate inclusive innovation in the country. I would like to thank all our valuable panelists, SDC, NRB, NTHL, and IME, and also the valuable and very insightful questions from the audience. In the coming days, we are going to share with you the recordings and all the materials related to this webinar, the presentation and answers to the questions. With that, I would like to thank you everyone and wish you a very nice day. Thank you very much.